So it's good to be back into Toronto. I spent 35 years of my working career in Toronto. I am a Windsor boy, though I was born and raised and educated in Windsor. Left Windsor for work, ended up in Toronto 35 years. Does anybody here not know who Gordie Howe is? Show of hands. It's not, you won't be embarrassed, don't worry. One in the back, brave person couple. So Gordie Howe, I would argue, and most hockey people would argue, is the greatest hockey player ever. Now, if you're a Wayne Gretzky fan, you would challenge me on that. But he's in that league as one of the greatest ever, and he's Canadian. And he played for, where's Jeff Singer? Detroit. Correct, he played for Detroit. So I heard Jeff talk about, or lamenting about the Maple Leafs. We like to call them the Maple Buds down in Windsor-Detroit. I'd ask you to go look at the NHL standings and see where the Red Wings sit compared to the Maple Leafs. But Gordie Howe, so how did we get the name Gordie Howe for the bridge? So this is an agreement between two countries, this infrastructure project. It goes between Windsor-Detroit, crosses the border, and when Stephen Harper was the Prime Minister, he worked with the President in the US to get this project approved at the national level. And part of that agreement ended up DC really giving it to Michigan to execute. So the governor of Michigan at the time was Snyder. He was a big hockey fan, Red Wings fan. I don't know if you know much about Stephen Harper. He's written books about hockey, big hockey fan. They came together to decide Gordie Howe is the name of the bridge. So that's how we got the name Gordie Howe, between the Prime Minister of the time and the governor of Michigan. And this project, so the last panel you hear about some of the issues you have to deal with to get infrastructure done. So one of the issues with our project is everything's times two. It's two countries. So there's municipal, there's provincial, there's federal, there's municipal, there's state, there's federal. So we have 6 levels of government we get to play with. So that's a lot of fun. I'm actually 35 years old. You'd never know it, right? So what's the need? So if you've listened to the news lately, you heard our Minister of Finance say 20% of the trade between us and the US is automotive. It's about right. 30% of all trade between Canada and the US goes across this border. And it goes across essentially a single bridge, the Ambassador Bridge, which is owned by a private family in Detroit. And if you happen to follow along with this project, you would know that family sued Canada 23 different cases. In all 23 cases, we have won, and it's gone as high as the Michigan Supreme Court. So you can see there's a need. If we have 30% of all our trade going with the US through this corridor, and it's on one bridge that is privately owned by a family in Detroit, that puts Canada at high risk. So we need that redundancy. We need to be able to have a bridge that we control. That was the thinking 20 years ago when we tried to get this bridge organized and built. Capacity is another reason. The current bridge is 4 lanes. The Gordie Howe will be 6, plus we'll have a pedestrian and multi-use path that crosses it. And it also will be, so connectivity. When the Gordie Howe Bridge is built, you'll be able to get in your car, your electric vehicle, in Montreal and drive all the way to Florida, and you won't hit a single stoplight. And you won't need to stop at the border. You'll be able to progress right through. So that's what we're doing with this new bridge. That's a bit of the organizational structure. You can see it's somewhat complex, and this is a simplified version because we have the American side of the whole thing and how it all wraps in. But we have, Bridging North America is the corporation that we have hired to build the bridge. So they're a consortium. There's ACON from Canada, there's Fluor from the US, and there's Dorados from Spain. So we have a consortium that's putting this whole thing together. It's a design build, P3 project. I report through to my board and to the Minister of Infrastructure. So I have, well, actually I got about 15 bosses, but I have a board of directors and the chair and then the minister. That's what the project looks like from an aerial view. So it's actually much more than a bridge. There are 2 ports of entry, and there's an interchange to the I-75 that makes it that seamless drive from Montreal down to Florida. On the Canadian side, the Herb Gray Parkway was built about 10 years ago. And that's what connects the 401 to where the bridge is being built. So the bridge design, 6 lanes, as I said, is a cable stay bridge. It's about 1.5 miles long from abutment to abutment. But from the 401 to the I-75, it's about 2.5 miles. So it's quite a long stretch of highway that's being built as a bridge, along with this pedestrian and cycle lane. That shows, that's not the bridge design, but that shows you one that's being built that's cable stay. And you can see that it's not yet connected. So you actually build it out over the water, but you don't build it from the water. So it's actually a cantilever design where you make the towers and then you build both directions. We are at the stage now where we're getting close to where we'll be ready to go over the water. So the picture on the right shows you the Canadian Tower, and we've started decking out to the land to connect to the first main pier, and then we'll head out over the water likely around February of next year. The height of that tower right now, where the 2 legs join, is about 420 feet. When the tower goes up another 300 or so before we're done on the towers, and it's about the same size as, First Canadian Place, that kind of height. Up close, you can see in the center, that's the decking. You see the gray, that's steel plating with bolts. So the decking is not welded, it is bolted together. And you may ask, why wouldn't you weld it? Well, this bridge, like all bridges, will move once it's done. And it needs to flex. And it will flex many feet, both horizontally and vertically with load and wind conditions. So that it needs to be able to flex and come back. That's why it's bolted, not welded. The Canadian Port of Entry, it is a large facility. Because Canada is funding the whole project, so that was another part of the agreement between the 2 countries. At the time, because of the privately owned bridge that exists right now that's owned by the American family, they fought the 20 some odd court cases. The governor could not get through his legislature approval to fund it. And so part of the deal that Canada made with them is it was, all right, we will fund it, but that means we control it. So that's why the Crown Corporation is a Canadian firm that, the firm I'm the CEO of, that's actually managing the whole thing. And we signed the contract with the consortium that's building it. And so at the very bottom of that picture is where the toll booths go. So all tolls will be collected on the Canadian side. We're going through a process right now of trying to establish the tolls. And there's a large marketing study. Being an engineer by education, I think that's pretty simple, right? One organization, the current bridge, is charging $8 for a vehicle to go across. The tunnel that is there is $5. I said, hey, 7, done. No, you can't do that. So there's a whole study that we're doing around marketing to see what is the right and optimal level to set for the tolls to get as much business as we can, but not overprice it so that people turn away and go elsewhere. We have to find that sweet spot. That a little bit of the construction update on the port of entry on the Canadian side. You see some of the buildings going up. There will be food inspection. There will be the border processing. There will be secondary. Anybody's ever crossed into the U.S. and has to go into secondary, you know what I mean. And then there will be room on the port of entry. So one of the things I talked to people about the project when this bridge is open between it and the Herb Gray Parkway, the Canadian governments, between municipal, provincial, and federal, will have spent $10 billion in this region. So now it's time for the private sector to pony up. Like, they need to take advantage of this and start leveraging the infrastructure. So there is room on the port of entry for innovative thinking. EV charging stations, you name it. Tons of data coming off the bridge, all sorts of opportunities. People need to start thinking in that way because of that kind of investment. It's time to take advantage of that now and really leverage it. That's the U.S. port of entry, slightly larger than the Canadian port of entry. It's just really the demands of the border agencies on both sides of the border is what drove the size of the ports of entry. They are outside of Vancouver and Los Angeles. They're the largest ports of entry in North America once they're built. And that's the U.S. port of entry. You can see some of the buildings going up. And on the right-hand side upper, you can see the 2 towers that are rising that go over the Detroit River. Those 2 towers are not in water. They're on land. It's about half a mile, a little over half a mile between the 2 towers. So a bit of a funny story, and I'll clean up the language for you, but I was up the top of the Canadian Tower a few months ago, and the gentleman that's actually in charge of constructing this bridge, I was up there with him, Terry. He happened to be a Windsor boy. He left Windsor also, but was back for this project. And he looked across the U.S. Tower, and he said to me, "Oh my, that's a long way across." And I almost fell over. I said, "Terry, you're building this. What do you mean this is a long way across?" When you look at it, it's a half mile across open water, and you got to connect the 2 bridges as they come together. Be quite a feat once it's done. And that's the interchange. So that's the equivalent of the Herb Gray Parkway. It is the connection from the bridge to the I-75 and the interstate system in the U.S. You talked about the cable stay bridge. You saw pictures at the beginning. In fact, there are 13 bridges in this project because you have all those bridges associated with the interchange. And then you have the bridges for the approach to the main bridge. So 13 bridges in total. And you can tell from that drawing, those are not just simple straight ramps. Most of those bridges are 3-dimensional. So that will be a challenge putting those together also. That's a look at one of the new overpasses at the I-75. So we took down a lot of the old overpasses because they were in the way for where the bridge is going to be connected and put into overpasses. So a lot of work gets done, as you can imagine, working with the local communities to manage the impacts on them when you have this kind of construction project. I'll touch on that a little bit in a minute. Sustainability. So we are targeted, and we're going to exceed the target for sustainability. We were envisioned silver was the target. We're now have hit gold, and we think we'll be platinum. We've pushed the design team, and they've stepped up to it. And right now, it looks like we're going to get platinum level, which that'd be pretty good achievement when you exceed your goal by that much. Some of the features of sustainability that we're ensuring it happens. A lot will be for reduced energy use and minimize impact on the environment. You wouldn't think a bridge would do that, but if you keep in mind that you have 2 ports of entry and all that vehicle traffic, and therefore all the human traffic, and all those buildings need to be heated and air conditioned and managed, and they need to have 24/7 electricity. The border agencies demand that you have your own electrical power supply. So if the grid goes down, they stay up. So we have our own energy complex for both sides of the border. And some landscaping to make it blend in with the environment. There is a local forest right on the Detroit River on the Canadian side. There's a lot of effort right now to make that a national park. It's now the local government and the Liberal federal government are working it's gone through second reading in Ottawa. It looks like it will become a national park, so we'll make sure we blend in with that. That's the envision I was talking about. We have just received that platinum award. So we received it. Sorry, I told you we're almost there. So we did get the platinum award. And community benefits. This is the part that I think is very unique about this project. We've put a lot of effort into working with the local stakeholders, both sides of the border, to minimize the impact and recognize the impact. So we actually have $20 million in the contract with Bridging North America to go and use that to do things to positively impact the neighborhood. So for instance, on the Detroit side, there's a lot of homes that are still occupied in the area and they're not moving. The city of Detroit had a campaign to move people out of the region where the bridge is being built. A lot of people did move, so we funded that and moved these people. There are those that decide to stay. That's my neighborhood. I'm not leaving. So we've put new roofs on homes. We've brought in new electrical supply to these homes. So a lot of work on both sides of the border to try to accommodate the impacts. And it has a huge impact for a corporation like me, because anytime you get any heat from anybody, and we get lots of heat as we're going through all this, the local communities stand up for you. It's amazing. It just warms your heart because you get a lot of heat and when things don't go right in a project, and these communities will come out and say, no, we like what's going on. We're on side with this bridge build. It makes a big difference if you can get the communities on your side to speak for you. And the team that we have that's doing that is having a huge impact. So we have both this neighborhood infrastructure strategy, but we also have workforce development. So we've had just shy of 1,000 companies, both sides of the border, as part of this participation strategy to get work with B&A so that they can benefit themselves economically from the bridge build. So Bridging North America and WDBA hires a heck of a lot of local contractors. And when I say local, I'm talking about anybody that is in driving distance within a day. So, companies in Toronto, companies in Waterloo, companies in London, same thing in the Michigan side. It's not just Windsor-Detroit. It's a large area that this encompasses. That's a bit more about that. And then getting ready for operations. I don't know if anybody's ever had to be, or been involved in a turnover from a construction project to something that has to be operated. If you ever had to do that, this is the most complex part of it. You think a bridge build is pretty complex, and it is. But when the new CEO, or there's a new CEO for Bridging North America that came in about a year ago, and the first thing he said is, "I'm worried about commissioning," and I wanted to give the guy a great big hug, because that's what was worrying me. Just from my background, I know what it's like on commissioning. So this is very important and very complex. Talk a little bit about that. And you can learn more at those locations. So any questions, if there's time left, otherwise I'll be outside. And we answer any questions out there. Sure.
Bryce, how many years for that bridge to be, the capital cost to be recovered through tolls?
So the question is, can we recoup the money we're spending to build it through tolls? And the government of Canada they're not looking for it to be recouped. That was not the idea behind it. So when we set the tolls as marketing strategy, we need to be careful not to think that we're going to try to recoup this money, because that may outprice us in the marketplace. The bridge is good for 130 years, so we got 130 years to try to get the money back, but it's not going to be paid back in 50 or 60 years. I'll be long gone, even though I'm only 35.
Bryce, has there been any consideration to use materials and technologies for low carbon emissions during the construction and operations?
So the question is around low carbon technologies. That's part of the design, part of the requirements. It was to have low emissions. And so the Energy Center is doing just that. So we're looking at using materials, and that's part of the design to reduce the carbon footprint. Is this bridge replacing the Ambassador? No. We want the redundancy. You saw the blockades that happened. It happened in Windsor at the Ambassador. So you need two bridges. I think we're done.